Smart aesthetics, branding, marketing, entrepreneurship.
Greetings and welcome back to the KMA Aesthetic podcast. On today's solo episode, we're doing like a mid-year bingo check-in. So as you guys know, at the beginning of the year, we made bingo cards of our goals. It went kind of viral on social media, racking up 1 million views on TikTok and at least 800,000 on Instagram for how we made them with Canva. So I know a lot of you guys downloaded our template. It's $2.24 on MKW under the resources tab. But I want to kind of take this episode as part accountability and part just sharing where we're at as far as our goals go. So I have my bingo card up and hopefully we will be able to link it or at least share it on social media once we have it so you can see our progress. The other thing that we've implemented this year is hosting a bingo accountability group, a goals accountability group. So for the last 6 months, we've had meetings with the 12 people that selected to be in the group, applied and were selected, and helping them achieve their goals and talk through how many of their goals were related to each other, which is something I'd also like to do in today's episode. So I want to kind of point to the things that we were able to knock off, like right off the top, and then things that our team is still working towards and whether we've made progress on those things or not, because some of them we have and some of them we definitely have not. So without further ado, get into today's episode. I hope you enjoy. As always, if you love this, please share it with a friend. Don't forget, we're also on YouTube and we love when you give us feedback, leave a review. So if you have an idea as well for the podcast at mkwcreative.co is who you're going to want to email. So let's get into my own, drumroll please, bingo card. So on the bingo card, basically how we structured this, and if you're wanting to do this with your team or your company or your friends, this is what I would recommend. So what we did first and foremost is we identified a few different categories of goals. So we had client-based goals, we had social media-based goals, we had marketing-based goals, and we had just general skills improvements based goals. So we went and sat down as a team in end of December, beginning January to identify what all these goals were going to be. And then each person, as we were listing off the goals, were filling them into their own bingo template. So if you go get the bingo template on my website, you can download it for, like I said, $2.24. It will give you all of the text boxes in which you can type out the goals. And the idea is every person on the team has their goals in different boxes, which therefore randomizes their opportunity to win bingo. So either getting 5 across or 5 down or 5 diagonal, right? With your free space in the middle, that leaves you space for 24 goals, which is a lot, right? Those are a lot of different goals to try to hit, especially in a year. But what I was noticing, not only through our bingos chart, but also through all the other bingos that I've helped through the bingo group, is a lot of the goals are somewhat related to each other when you start to break them down. So what I'm going to do now is kind of run you through the goals that we have achieved, kind of more or less in the chronological order that we achieved them, to give you a sense for what was a high reach for us and what we're still working on, right? So the first goal, which was so ironic, is we wanted to hit 1 million views on a TikTok video. Up until this year, the most views I'd ever gotten on a video was about 400 or 500,000 views. And ironically, what had happened is it was the time-lapse recording and the Siri voice, literally, of instead of a goals list, what if you did bingo instead? Something to that effect, on the actual bingo card creation video. So I love that the first goal out the gate was the one that was literally on the bingo card. The first video that we made about the bingo card hit 1 million views. So that definitely upped the energy about this bingo manifestation situation that was happening on our channels as well as through social media and in other places, right? So that was the first one. The next one that was really exciting right out the gate is the projects that we were working on in the beginning of the year. So some of these projects, we didn't count the ones that the contracts were signed in 2023. Instead, we only counted the projects that were starting in 2024. So they had to come in as a new lead in 2024, sign, and then finish the project in 2024. And one of the ones we were super excited about was with FRG. So FRG was is the real estate group in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We had finished their branding by end of last year, but they had inquired and signed the new contract for social media and creative direction retainer by January. Well, really we started mid-February. So that was a new project that is like a big chunky scope of work for our team. It is nice recurring revenue for our team and it allows us to really flex our muscles and make sure that we are doing the most when it comes to helping promote their business and really living out all the brand values that we got such an in-depth look at when we were starting to work through that project. So that was a really exciting one. The next one is checking off a lot of boxes. And you guys heard her podcast episode already, but I got to interview Morgan Drinks Coffee on the podcast. So one of our goals on the bingo card was to interview a creator with over 1 million reach on the podcast. Morgan has, I think, 6 million followers the last time I checked. So she checked that one for sure. So that killed our creator with 1 million reach on the podcast goal. Also influencer founder, because she's influencer creator founder, and client with product-based business because she is rolling out other things in the future that we are counting to that, and a food-based client. So we had like a quadruple dip on Morgan alone, which was so exciting because she totally represents for us an ideal client, right? Someone who's grown a community on social, someone who probably DIY'd or got a little bit of help with their branding to begin with, is wanting to reach that next level, knows who they are, like deeply, deeply knows who they are and knows who they want to talk to, has social presence across multiple platforms, and then also like really knows how to speak well to it. Like she is an expert in her field for sure. She's the world barista champion. So she knocked off a lot of the goals on this bingo card, which is really exciting because I think that she really represents the type of client that we want to work with. But we also got another client that is brick and mortar opening, which is one of our other goals. So we worked really closely with Polar Bear Eats. We ended up kind of parting ways from that project right before their opening. I really took a hit to the ego on that one because I really wanted our team to be there and to be able to see a logo actually physically manifested in signage and print materials and stuff like that is something that I've really wanted to do more of. So the brick and mortar opening for Lily Par and for Salt Dog are two things that will be happening in this calendar year, most likely, most hopefully. So those are two projects that we just wrapped in the end of May that will be going live soon on our socials, but being able to knock off that goal was pretty huge for us. Another goal that felt really intimidating, but was something that we got to pretty quickly out the gate, 5-star reviews. Just sometimes as creatives, we forget to ask people to leave us reviews for our work. And we decided to go back to referral partners that we had or clients that we'd worked with for a while, people that maybe forgot to leave a review over the holidays, and ask them to leave those 5-star reviews. And those racked up real quick. So we like to collect reviews on both Facebook and Google. Those are the two spots that you might see them. And that's where we have the 5-star reviews goal knocked off. The other one that we have finished is your own Skillshare. So part of the goals for our team was to really make sure that everyone is continuing to build their educational knowledge base and not just get stuck in the way of doing things, but really challenge themselves and learn from each other. Like a lot of good learning happens when we learn socially. So sometimes that's not always the question that you ask that you need the answer to, but you need to listen to someone else ask a question that you never thought of that then spurs a whole new idea of thinking, right? A whole new way of thinking. So that's something that I really encouraged my team to do. I led the first Skillshare with our team, which was about the AI tools that we use. So really doing a deep dive on ChatGPT alongside Midjourney, alongside Krea and Modify and Runway and all those tools that we really love, to kind of put them all side by side and really showcase how I've been using them so that the team can start to implement that in their process. We also overhauled our ChatGPT so that we have a different channel per client so that it continues to learn from the database of stuff. And we're not starting new threads every time. So that was a really interesting Skillshare. And then Cody followed that up with her own Skillshare about time management, which again is something that is so overlooked, but it's such an essential skill for running a team and running projects, is figuring out how you're going to spread out your time. So the time management one was also pretty amazing. So that was the only goal of the whole bingo list, actually, that was individual. And I've been encouraging everyone to, the sooner you get it knocked out is the sooner you have a chance to hit a bingo. So the Skillshare one, good to go. So that leaves us at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 out of 24 goals checked off, marked, right? And you can go to our Instagram and see what this looks like by the time this episode is out. Now, let's talk about some of the goals we haven't hit yet, but we want to hit, and we've had some very strong leads for. So first would be hotel brand / hospitality. Because we wrapped the project for Piano Chi, like this contract was technically signed last year. We really want to get another hospitality project. We all agreed, okay, maybe we can really hold out for one more hotel or hospitality brand. So that one we're just kind of parking so we keep our eyes and ears out. Also, for any of these goals, if any of you listening know someone that needs what we do, now you know where we're headed as far as what we're looking for to work on. So hospitality brand is up there. The other one, festival branding. We would like to do a food festival, a beverage festival, an arts festival, a culture festival, anything that is event based. And we've had a few feelers out in the community for this type of opportunity. I've gotten way more involved in local networking recently to try to foster some of those leads. And I think if I were to advise myself on this project, it would be hitting up the corporate event planners that I know and really showing them what we were able to do with San Diego Open, for example. So San Diego Open tennis tournament for us is like such a good example of what we can do with event-based branding. And there were so many ideas with that project that like never got to come to fruition, which is unfortunate. But the festival branding, I think, for our team would be such a fun flex of creative skills and really showcase the variety of what we can do, from social to packaging to print to influencers to logos and display and everything like that. Like there's so much visual collateral that happens with a festival that festivals and hospitality are like the two last big client goals that we have on this bingo card. We also have a decent number of goals related to the podcast. So one of the goals this year, as you heard it already, probably at the top of this episode, was to get the podcast to, quote, pay for itself. So the podcast itself, by the time I've spent the time to record the episodes, Berta has spent the time to edit and publish everything. We've gotten it up to YouTube. We've gotten it up to the podcast. We've got Cody project managing and helping to book all the guests, Brittany doing outreach. The podcast costs us roughly $15,000 a year to run. So $15K annually to put forward on the podcast. So we started opening up sponsorship opportunities. We're now over 160 episodes into this thing. And a lot of our pitching at the beginning of the year was focused on finding the brands that would align with our audience and start doing some ad placements to offset the cost of the podcast. We've made progress on this, obviously, but by no means is it are we at the point where it's covering the full 15K. So we're moving towards that because it's something that sustains this podcast existing in the first place, which is an invitation to all of you listening. If you have a product or a service that you think would benefit from getting access to our audience on a weekly basis and you want an original ad read, this is your spot to do so. So email us podcast@mkwcreative.co for access to that pitch deck, because we have everything laid out in a really nice pitch deck. But getting the podcast to a point where we're break even to the point of monetizing to income generate from the podcast would be amazing. But I want to also remind you, like, the goal of this podcast was never truly to be a podcaster by trade. This was an opportunity for me to go talk to interesting people that I wanted to work with. So in a way, it's paid for itself because it's a lead generation tool, and it gives me an opportunity to go, quote, like, pick someone's brain that otherwise maybe hasn't heard of us or hasn't found their way organically to our services, and really get to know them and like have a conversation, and then they know me, and then we can pass business to each other. So the podcast in that regard has definitely been worth it. Also because the podcast gives us content to work with for social. So if you're watching this on TikTok or on Reels or on YouTube, or you're listening to the podcast is a really good accountability tool for putting out consistent original content on social media. So in that way it has. But when we say pod pays for itself, we're trying to get to the point where we can cover our costs of the $15,000 with podcast ad revenue. Yeah. Or with YouTube revenue, right? Another podcast related goal is one of our goals this year is to do 10 podcast swaps. And admittedly, I've been slacking on this goal because I have plenty of people on the podcast that also host podcasts, and I get kind of shy to ask to be on theirs. So one of my goals this year is to do some podcast swaps so that there is that exchange and we can expose our audience to new people, and that I can also get access to new audiences. So this is an open call out as well. If you have a podcast or you know of a podcast or a web show that you think you'd like to hear me on, please let us know in the comments. Or if you are a host of a podcast and you'd like to have me as a guest, I'd love to be a guest on your show. Yeah. Another podcast related goal. Our goal is to really put more effort into our YouTube this year. We've been posting the podcast episodes onto YouTube, and our goal with YouTube is 1,000 subscribers so that we can begin to monetize. So right now we're sitting, I think by the time I'm recording this, we're sitting at like 140 subscribers. So if you're a listener again to the podcast, this is your call to action to go ahead and head over to the YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed there. I know some people really prefer to listen on YouTube. They like turn it on like a show. I'd like to do better quality YouTube videos. That's a really big goal of mine. So I want to make sure that we have better cameras, better lighting, better setup, and we've started to head in that direction. So we're going to be taking over part of the offices over at Inside by Savvy, which is my parents' interior design showroom, and setting up a podcast rig in there. We have lights, we have cameras, we have mics, we have all the gear and all the cords and all the things. So that's literally my weekend project this weekend, is trying to figure out how to set up all of that so that we can have better YouTube videos. I also would like to start to share the YouTube videos, make longer format ones of the brand design videos, because I think that having them live on Loom or having them live on on Canva is just selling it a bit short. Like, they're videos that people are watching anyway because we're sending them as portfolio pieces. And so I'd love for those portfolio pieces to also live on YouTube and to have either an intro and an outro that really explains it, or re-record it from the top, right? Like, this was the project. Was the first phase with branding. Here's the breakdown of branding. Since we worked with them on branding, this is what we've been able to pull together. And then pull those as kind of, 20 to 30 minute long episodes, essentially, of like a TV show almost. This is the whole branding project of what our team has been able to do. So that's the potential with YouTube. I think it's possible. Those are the YouTube goals, YouTube and podcast goals. Another big podcast goal, 100,000 lifetime downloads. We're not there yet. I think we're between 60 and 70,000. And we've been doing this for 3 years. So it's inching along, which is just also a reminder to anyone who listens to the show and loves the show. We love it when you share. Like, we love it when you send it to people. We love when you're watching on TikTok Live and you share the live so that people can hear and listen to what we've got going on. So the 100K podcast downloads is a really big goal for us as well. Yep. Other social media related goals, and I'm going to kind of contradict myself because I've made plenty of podcast episodes about how your follower number is not indicative of your success, and yet we still put follower numbers onto our goals chart, which I somewhat regret doing, just because I think it's not indicative of the value that you bring at all, and that there's so many fake followers on social media that if I really wanted to get more followers, there's ways to do it. But some of these goals on here, one of them is 20,000 followers on Instagram. So by the time we're recording, we're at about 16,000 followers. Growth on Instagram is a grind, right? So it's one of those things where it's like, there's some tools that we've implemented that have helped us grow our account. And one of those is collaborative posting. Collab posting with our clients has been huge for us to get exposure to new audiences and to show people what we've got kind of cooking on behind the scenes. Instagram is one of the tools that I've also tried to outsource this year, and more than try, I have outsourced. I've gotten a lot of help from Gabby and from Madison and from our whole team to create more of a brand presence on the account instead of a personal presence. So that's been a bit of a shift. I think it was a lot easier to kind of post on the cuff and be posting top of mind, behind the scenes, day in the lifestyle stuff when it was just me running my Instagram account. But now that MKW Creative Co. represents so much more than me and what I think and what I do in a day-to-day, we're still trying to find our footing with consistency with Instagram. One of the things that we've implemented, which we're gearing up to do again, is what we're kind of calling a content flood, meaning when we finish a client project, we're not just posting about it once and calling it good, but we're posting about it consistently 14, 15, 16 times in a row for multiple days on end. And really kind of using the Instagram as a pseudo portfolio, active portfolio, to showcase the project that we're most excited about in extreme depth, right? So that's something that I think could also help us get to that 20K mark, especially collaborative posting with clients' accounts that are larger than ours definitely help. And then something that we hopefully will be implementing here through the summer are going to be giveaways, because I have a ton of merch and a ton of stuff that I would love to give to people. And I'd like to get into a consistent giveaway schedule, especially with the Kiss My Portfolio challenges, with some Kiss My Aesthetic merch that I have lying around. So keep your eyes and ears out for that. That's going to be through our Instagram most likely. But that's a really big goal for us, is to kind of, again, the follower number is a really easy thing to put on a goals chart because it's so short and sweet. But what we're the underlying goal of growing our presence on Instagram is to connect more with our ideal client. So making sure that we're spending good time engaging with the accounts that we think could use our help, making sure that we're spending good time engaging with our clients' accounts and that we're showing up in their comment sections so that we can really get exposure through their audiences. All things that we could be doing better with Instagram. Another metrics-based goal on our list is 5K email subscribers. And this to me is like, I'm going to have to eat a slice of humble pie because we sent out one email all year. And there's no way I can expect the email list to grow if there's no consistency. So, and also if we don't talk about it. So the email subscribers goal has almost kind of been put on the back burner because we're considering starting up a Substack. So Substack is an email newsletter-ish platform where you can also have paywall content, meaning you can have subscription content for certain audiences. So one of the things we're playing with is like, okay, do we go back to the regular standard email list, or do we use Substack to create a list that's specific to clients and a list that's specific to designers and creatives that want to learn? Because there's a huge backlog of work to be shared for both. So that's kind of what we're playing with. I do feel like email is one of those sleeper marketing things that I am not a consumer of. So as a marketer, I have a harder time understanding platforms that I don't naturally consume, which I think is an everybody thing. So it's why I'm not as active as I'd like to be on LinkedIn. It's why I'm not as active as I'd like to be on email, is I don't consider myself a consumer of that type of media. So it's a little harder for me to wrap my brain around what kind of content performs there. And my tendency as an overachiever is to make it too complicated to the point of, well, I'm not going to send it unless it's perfect, which is kind of the kiss of death. So, real vulnerable on this podcast today, sharing all the things I think I'm not doing very well, but email is one of them. The other that I think we could be doing better with is web sales. So we have such a huge backlog of things to sell on my site, which would include all the Kiss My Portfolio challenges. We've got the Canva editable social templates. We've got 2 trainings on how to make GIFs. We've got a training on how to make art history. There's like a whole treasure trove of stuff that I just quite literally forget is on there. So trying to hit 15K in web sales goal, we actually got quite far on selling bingo cards for $2.24. We sold over 100 of them. So that's something in the bucket, but it's definitely not close to 15K. So that's something that I'd like us to focus more effort on for the second half of the year, is figuring out how we want to promote that. And what I mean by like a lot of these goals being related is if we kicked back up the email list and we were more aggressive with the email list, could we convert more web sales? Probably, right? So related, essentially. If we were talking about all of these resources that we had on the podcast, for example, could we make more sales? Probably. So as a marketer, like I know what we could be doing differently. Sometimes it's inertia, and these are goals, right? Is because they're aspirational. They're things that are meant to challenge us and push us to get the things that we want by keep coming back to it every month and being like, oh yeah, remember when that's what we said what we wanted? That doesn't mean that those things can't change, right? But that's definitely one of them. Another one, 10,000 members in the Facebook group. I think we're sitting at 7,100. So we're inching our way forward. But again, it's more of I think there's an issue sometimes of us not repeating our message enough. Obviously, we've got a lot going on. I've been doing this for 10 years. We've got 9 people on our team. Like there's a lot going on. So it's sometimes I feel the pressure that it falls on my shoulders to make sure that we have all of this cranking. But what I'm so grateful for is that this bingo card is coming back. We're coming back to it to remind ourselves where we're at and what we could be doing differently. And what we said we wanted 6 months ago and kind of sticking to it, right? So 10,000 members in the Facebook group. Let me just pitch you on the Kiss My Aesthetic Facebook group, first of all. Kiss My Aesthetic Facebook group has been around now for 7 years, and there is so much content in there to binge. And on top of that, there are so many job opportunities. So if you're creative or you're a small business owner or you want to work with us and maybe you don't have the budget, this is where I send clients that aren't totally aligned with working with us. Is I say, hey, bad news, we're not going to be the best fit for your project, whether timeline or budget, or we don't have experience in this field, etc. I will send them to the Kiss My Aesthetic Facebook group and say, there's a whole Facebook group you can go to and you can post about your project and you'll find someone to work with for sure. There's a lot of like little freelance gigs. My kind of general rule of thumb for anybody posting is that trying to hire someone new, you should shoot for 5 hours a week at $30 an hour, which is like very competitive pay, especially remotely for most places. So there's oodles of opportunity. There's also so much content in there. So if you go over to the media tab, you can go back and watch like old conversations from the podcast. You can read from other people's questions. You can get answers from them. You can ask questions. The only rule is it is a strictly non-promotional group. So if you send a post into the Kiss My Aesthetic Facebook group and you're just promoting yourself and what you have to offer, it will get deleted and you'll get kicked out. And that's how we make it a nice Facebook group, because then it doesn't turn into spam central penny saver ad and becomes nice and well controlled, right? Last two goals that we have on here is team retreat and design award. Design award within reach. Our team's going to be applying for the Reelies. If you haven't followed the Reelies, it's a Reels awards show. But a lot of the awards that you apply for come with application fees. So something that our team is starting to dip our toe in is doing research on some of these application fees, figuring out which ones are worth applying to. I'd love for us to submit for like Logo Lounge and some of the other design, like brand design based awards, but having a design award under our belt would be lovely. But it also goes to show to all of you guys, like if you don't know, anyone that puts like award winning design firm, blah, 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 they had to pay to submit and then they won. Like they won legitly, but you still have to pay to submit. And it's been something that we've been busy enough that it hasn't been a high priority. And now in year 10 of our business, like, well, maybe we should throw our hat in the ring for some of these things. So that's something we're working on behind the scenes. And then team retreat as well. Celebrating our 10-year business anniversary in September. We're going to have the team out here in San Diego. So once that is done, that goal is finished. But we're still racing for bingo, man. Like we've got 9 out of the 24 goals completed. 9, did I say 9? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11, excuse me. 11 out of 24. So we almost hit the halfway point of our bingo's goals chart. And the bingo group has also been really interesting. So I've been able to kind of track everyone's progress there, help them work through their goals, help them figure out which ones to focus on first, and really outline which ones are snowball type goals. Like, okay, if I did 10 podcast swaps, could that help me get to 100K podcast downloads? Probably, right? So if the focus should be on doing podcast swaps, will that then have a domino effect on the other things that are in my list? If you want to download your own bingo card, like I said, mkwcreative.co/resources, that will take you to all of our downloadables, and you can get the bingo card for $2.24 for the year 2024. Even if you wanted to make a bingo card for the second half of the year, I think that is totally fair game. If you do, I'd love to see it. Tag us on social, share it into the Facebook group, tag me on Instagram. Would love to see what you've got cooking. And the goal here would be really helping each other with our goals by referring projects or people or connections in the comments, because a rising tide lifts all boats. And with that, I'll sign off. I hope you have a great week, and join into the Facebook group Kiss My Aesthetic for more goal setting stuff. And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much. Bye.